Okay, I'm going to make a start. We'll let more people join in the background, but I'm going to start off because I know Wally's going to want to use all the time we've got today. So thank you everyone for joining us. So just to set a bit of context, I'm Josie Sterling. I work for National Operations at Forestry England, and I'm also the co-chair of our Women's Staff Network for Forestry Commission, alongside Katrina Southgate. So the purpose of our Women's Staff Network is to provide mutual support to women in the organisation, to help inform staff about issues particularly affecting women, gender equality matters, and helping to how improve things in the organisation in terms of how we deal with gender balance and women. It's open to all women who work with Forestry Commission and also to any male allies or anybody else that wants to join. We tend to host a few sessions like this over the year, usually once a month with different themes and a book club as well. So before I go any further, just to let you know, we are recording the session today. There are going to be closed captions and subtitles as well in the chat if you need them. Wally's got a couple of Slido and interactive parts, and also if you've got any questions, you can put them in the chat as well. We'll come to them at the end if that's okay. We've got quite a lot of people on the line today from different organisations. So if you want to drop into the chat where you are, who you are, where you come from, that would be really helpful, and we can see who we've got today. So I'm just going to do a little bit to introduce Wally before he starts. I am going to have to read this because I don't know all the top of my head, but our speaker today is the Forestry Commission's Diversity and Wellbeing Manager, Wali Rahman, who's on the screen already. He's got over 18 years of experience working in various roles within further and higher education, local government, the community and voluntary sector, and now in civil service with Forestry Commission. Wali was Bath's first community liaison coordinator, helping to build bridges between 15,000 students and 90,000 plus resident population, and was also Wiltshire's first Prevent officer. He was part of Wiltshire's economic development team, leading on apprentices before moving into HR and organisational development, and now in his dream role of leading on diversity and inclusion. He's developed diversity and inclusion training, which has been delivered to over 700 people across Wiltshire Council, Wiltshire Police, the NHS, the Civil Service and schools. He's the co-chair of the Wiltshire Council BME Staff Network for 5 years, during which time the network flourished and he gained national recognition, and also set up the Ethnic Minority Staff Network here at the Forestry Commission. He's helped to set up the Women's Staff Networks at Wiltshire Council and the Forestry Commission. He graduated from the Stepping Up Diversity Leadership Programme and has also received the Rising Star Award in 2023, while he was also recognised as top 50 most influential Muslims in Europe in 2023. And helped the Forestry Commission gain the Includability, Diversity and Inclusion Award. He was recently part of a panel at the Women Empowering Defence Conference, speaking on the topic of male allyship, which is why I've invited him along today to do this talk. And as you can tell from that background, he is very well set to do that. So welcome to Wally. I'm going to hand over to him now. He's going to talk for about 40 minutes, and then we'll have the time for questions at the end. So over to you, Wally.
Thanks very much, Josie, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. Just bear with me a moment while I just set my screen right. And then I shall begin. Hopefully you can all see the screen and the slides. Right, so thank you for the introduction, Josie, and good to see so many people from across the organisation and wider civil service and beyond. So welcome everyone to this important topic. As Josie said, I was really inspired by my recent participation in the Male Allyship panel at the Women Empowering Defence conference in London, and I want to bring some of that to this as well. So before I begin, I just wanted to say, isn't it such an amazing summer of sport that we're having? And I hope everyone's just as excited and still jubilant about the successes of the England football team. And I still can't believe that we're European champions. Everyone here still delighted about that? I see some nods or thumbs up. Yeah. Yeah, everyone's happy about that. Some of you might be thinking, what am I talking about? We didn't win the Euros. And you'd actually be wrong, because I'm not talking about the men's team. I'm actually talking about the women's team, who actually won the Euros in 2022. So, and that was a great moment for English football and sport. But unfortunately, it's one we take for granted simply because it's not the men's team. And what a shame that is, because the Lionesses are currently European champions and they got to the final of the World Cup. So, despite the successes of the women's football team, the women's game, has come a long way, and it wasn't always easy. And I'm sure they'll go much further in the years ahead. And in 2011, the Women's Super League was launched as a semi-professional league, which was a significant step forward for women's football in the UK. However, the disparity in funding, media coverage, and salaries between the Women's League and the Men's Premier League was stark. Female players often had to juggle multiple jobs to support their football careers, and their matches received minimal attention from the media and sponsors. However, the turning point came in 2017 when the Football Association, the FA, announced plans to fully professionalise the Women's League. This move was driven by the growing recognition of women's football and the relentless advocacy from players, fans, and crucially male allies within the sport. High-profile male footballers and managers such as Gary Lineker, Jurgen Klopp, they all publicly supported the women's game, calling for better funding, facilities, and media coverage. Their voices amplified the call for equality and brought broader attention to the systemic issues facing female footballers. Media companies like Sky Sports and the BBC began to invest significantly in broadcasting women's league matches, bringing the game to millions of households. Sponsorship deals followed, with brands recognizing the value and potential of women's football. One notable moment of male allyship came from the England men's national team. So after the Lionesses reached the semi-final of the 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup, the men's team took to social media to congratulate and support them, highlighting their achievements and calling for greater investment in women's football. This public endorsement from their male counterparts helped shift public perception and increase the visibility and credibility of the women's game. Of course, as we already mentioned, the Lionesses won the Euros in 2022, unlike the men's team, and reached the Women's World Cup final in 2023. So this is a powerful example of how gender equity can be achieved through persistence, investment, and crucially, male allyship. Of course, please don't misunderstand me. I don't want to take anything away from the women's team. The highlighting of the male allyship is merely just to show what impact it can have. Of course, the success all belongs to the Lionesses. And male allyship is so important. And here's a quote from one of the greats, so the late great Kofi Annan, who said, "Gender equality is more than a goal in itself. It is a precondition for meeting the challenge of reducing poverty, promoting sustainable development, and building good governance." And of course, gender equality is one of the 17 UN SDGs, UN Sustainable Development Goals, and many of the other goals tie in to gender equality. There's a strong link. So what are the global challenges then facing gender equality? Just mention a few here. The major one being that as it stands now, it will take 134 years to eradicate the gender pay gap globally. Isn't that stark and shocking? if we manage to close the gender pay gap, this will increase global GDP by 20%. So that would be a huge boost to the worldwide economy. We know globally, women make up 42% of the workforce, yet they only make up 31.7% of senior leadership roles. And when it comes to the C-suite, so executive positions, they're even less and only make up a quarter. So what are the challenges we face in the UK? So in the UK, the gender pay gap currently sits around 14.3%, and that's for all employees. So that includes full-time and part-time. Now, the gender pay gap measures the difference between average hourly earnings, excluding overtime, of men and women as a proportion of men's average hourly earnings. It's a measure across all jobs in the UK, not of the difference in pay between men and women for doing the same job. And the reasons for the gender pay gap are complex and interrelated and include economic, cultural, societal, and educational factors. And these include a lack of flexible working options, women being the main providers of unpaid caring responsibilities, occupational segregation, the undervaluing of women's work, and pay discrimination, to name a few. And although there's been progress in female representation at the top of organizations, there's still a long way to go until we can claim equality of opportunity in career progression based on gender. There has, however, been notable progress spurred on by the FTSE Women Leaders Review, the Hampton-Alexander Review, and the Davies Review, with the 40% voluntary target for women on boards met by FTSE 350 companies 3 years in advance of the 2025 target and sitting at 42% in 2024. However, there's still a lack of female representation in executive director positions compared to non-executive roles, meaning that women are still underrepresented in operational roles, so they don't really have the day-to-day influence on decision-making in UK businesses. So the focus now needs to be on increasing the number of women in executive committee roles and their teams to build a strong pipeline of female talent for the future. On top of all of that, women report of being sexually harassed at work. So 4% of female employees reported being sexually harassed at work, according to the CIPD. 1 in 9 mothers, that's 11%, were dismissed, made redundant, or bullied out of their jobs. So again, shocking statistics there from the CIPD, and that all needs to change. On top of that, we see that 86% of women aged 18 to 24 have experienced sexual harassment in public spaces. 71% of all women across all age groups have experienced sexual harassment. 52% of women experience sexual harassment at work. And 9% of women aged 16 and over were victims of domestic abuse between October 2021 and March 2022. 5.7% of women and 3.2% of men experienced domestic abuse in 2023. And in 2020, a woman was killed every 3 days by a man. And we all know about the famous examples of Sabina Nessa and Sarah Everard, and they were just a couple of many women who were killed at the hands of men. And all of this data is from the Guardian, ONS, Office for National Statistics, and King's College Research. Now let's look at some of the current attitudes towards gender equality. And this also is not encouraging, unfortunately. So Ipsos did a survey recently, and these are some of their findings. So they found that 60% of Gen Z men surveyed across 31 countries think women's equality discriminates against men. 40% of Americans and 47% of Britons say that women's equality has gone far enough, and that's an increase from 38% in 2023 and an even higher increase from 2019 when it was 29%. And that's across both men and women, all genders. 56% of men hold this view, which is up from 44%. And worryingly as well, 39% of women hold this view. And here is a summary of the key findings. So they said that the youngest generations are not necessarily the most progressive. So we mentioned about Gen Z or Gen Z and millennials also. They're more likely to think that a man who stays at home to look after his children is less of a man when it comes to giving women equal rights with men. Things have gone far enough than older generations. So that's some of their attitudes. Number two, when looking at younger people, mind the gender pay gap. So younger men are more conservative when it comes to issues of equality. There is a 20% point difference between Gen Z men and women when it comes to the statement, we have gone so far in promoting women's equality that we are now discriminating against men. Number three, people don't have a preference about the gender of their leaders, but experience matters. So this is something which is somewhat positive. Number four, support from men is necessary. People recognize that male allyship is important. So this backs up what we're talking about today. Number five, there are setbacks. Around half of people across 31 countries think that men are being asked to do too much to support gender equality. And number six, there are signs of progress, however, towards gender equality, but I don't think there's enough progress. It says people think male and female leaders are equally as good, which is great or bad, at delivering a series of political and business objectives. 55% think that male and female business leaders are both equally good at creating financially successful and innovative company. So this brings us to allyship. Now, what exactly is allyship, you may ask? So according to Dolly Chugg, who is a professor at New York University and an author, allyship is an informed, consistent, and empathetic practice that involves reflection, rethinking, and relearning past behaviors and approaches to constantly improve our self-awareness and adopt inclusive behaviors. So what are the characteristics then of an ally? Allyship requires a growth mindset. So hopefully you're all familiar with the concepts of a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So growth mindset says that we can learn and improve and develop. And a fixed mindset says we are who we are, and that's it, we can't change. So instead of striving to be good people, which is a fixed mindset where you're either good or bad, we should aim to be good-ish people. And being good-ish means acknowledging that we are always a work in progress. We're continuously learning, making mistakes, owning those mistakes, and improving from those mistakes. So this is crucial because when we are learning about and acting on behalf of marginalized groups we're not a part of, we are inevitably going to get things wrong because we don't experience those things firsthand. So growth mindset is essential for allies. It's about learning about others, and this takes patience and effort. and a lot of self-reflection. It's also dangerous for us to claim that we are allies. It shouldn't be for us to make that claim. Rather, the members of the group that we are supporting, let them decide if we're allies or not. Let them make that call. And if we are truly walking the talk, then no doubt they will give us that title, but it's not a badge that we should go around bragging about, because then it becomes performative and self-serving. And this is very dangerous. So effective allyship comes down to noticing also. We must notice what is happening around us. For example, I might not immediately notice that certain people are not being invited to meetings, or that certain individuals in meetings are sitting together, but we should be observing who's speaking at those meetings, who's being interrupted, and women get interrupted a lot more than men. Who is getting credit for ideas? Women, a lot of the times, have their ideas stolen by men who take credit for them. Who's being ignored? Whose ideas are supported? Who's being labeled as emotional or aggressive, a label which unfortunately women get labeled with a lot more. We also must look out for who's being praised and who isn't. So it's a bit like a scavenger hunt. Once you start noticing these things, you can begin to interrupt those systems. So you can start praising those people openly. You can start attributing ideas to the correct people and bring those who are ignored into the conversation. Sometimes we don't see what's right in front of us. So, for example, we might offend a group without realizing it. So a growth mindset helps us to see through these situations. So if I have a fixed mindset, on the other hand, I won't see my mistakes or learn from them, and I'll just use excuses, and I'll just say, oh, that's just, how I've been brought up, so I can't change. That's just my generation, and so on. It's just the way things are. Ineffective allyship often also involves cookie seeking. And this is like what we talked about already. It's about seeking validation and a pat on the back. For example, saying, oh, I donated to this cause, or I stood up for this cause, whether it's Black Lives Matter or Me Too, and so on. However, we should be explicit about our intention, saying things like, I don't know if this is a place where it's appropriate for me to speak. And we should reach out with no expectation of getting something back. Susan Lucia Annunzio talks about effective allyship and the 20-60-20 rule. So she says there are 20% of people who are already on our side. So these are what we call the converted. And what we need to do is find them and remind them about the issues, and they will actively and proactively take a part. Then there's another 20% who will fight against our efforts for diversity and inclusion and allyship. And these people are not likely to become our allies. So I don't say we completely abandon them, but we maybe not worry about them. She says then there's a 60% who are on the fence. And these people could go either way. So it's up to us to influence those 60 people to come on board and become allies and take part in the diversity and inclusion conversation. And how we do this is by stories, by involving them, making inclusion relevant to them, and so on. So this is the hidden audience that we often overlook, and we can engage them with the first 20%. So you might wonder, how can we be allies for something that we can never fully understand? As a man, I can never understand what it's like to be a woman. As a straight man, I can never understand what it's like for a gay man or a bisexual man. So it's not necessarily about fixing things, but bearing witness to the trauma of others. It's easy to say, I can't fix it, so I'm not going to see it. I can just pretend it doesn't exist. But true allyship means seeing and acknowledging the experiences of others, even if you can't fully understand them. So remember, allyship is a journey, not a destination. Embrace the growth mindset, keep learning, keep noticing, and keep supporting. So what is male allyship more specifically? Male allyship involves men actively supporting and advocating for gender equity in the workplace. It means recognizing and challenging gender biases and using one's influence to support female colleagues. Men have a unique position to amplify women's voices and challenge unconscious biases. Active male allyship creates a more inclusive and supportive workplace culture, benefiting everyone. Gender equity and equality doesn't just benefit women, it also enhances workplace relationships and team performance. Men in gender equitable workplaces report higher job satisfaction and better work-life balance. So gender equality, in summary, has a direct and positive impact on workplace culture, on business return on investment, innovation, corporate social responsibility, and attraction as an employer of talent. So, what do women want male allies to do? I put up a poll recently to our Forestry Commission Women Staff Network, asking them this very question. And they had a list of options as well as one which was other. And I also then put this on LinkedIn for the women in my social network. And I asked them to put the top 3 answers. So the top 3 things that women would like men to do more of to create more gender equitable workplaces. Number 1, unanimously, with 82% of women responding, putting this in their top 3, was to openly challenge discriminatory behaviors. The next 3 responses were all equal at 50%. So I've listed them as 2. So don't worry, it's not a typo on my part. So number 2 is listen actively and show empathy towards women's challenges. Number 2 is amplify women's voices. And number 2 is advocate for career advancement opportunities. So now you may or may not have seen this poll, but I want to put the same question to the women in the audience this afternoon. And this time it's an open question. You can put whatever you want. You're not restricted to those options. So if you can just open up your phone or another browser and either go to slido.com and enter the passcode or scan the QR code and fill that in. It should be active. Yeah, I can see people typing already. So I'll give you a few moments just to get your answers in, and then we'll see what that looks like. Good to see those coming in now. So we've got be open and present, care, accept our answer. Yep. Understand, support our networks, challenge bad behaviors, encourage development, observe and reflect, advocate for women's causes, empathize, call out poor behaviors from men towards women, understand. So the ones that appear larger are the more popular responses. So it gives us a flavor of what most of the respondents are saying. So understand comes out on top, see us as equal, support, listen. Great. So all of those are obviously important. So if anyone is saying that's what we should be doing, that is exactly what we should be doing. Yeah. And more. So I'm going to stop that there, if that's okay. Just see a couple more people typing, so I'll wait for them to stop. Okay, great. Thanks for that. And that is really useful intel as well, which I can share with participants, and we can share it with our male colleagues and get those conversations started and going. Now I want to come to the men in the audience, only the men. So my question is, are you currently doing any of these things that we saw? Be honest. Okay, we've had a couple of responses. Keep those coming. It's looking positive. And it's okay to say, I don't know. Especially as I was saying, a lot of the times, it should be so embedded and ingrained in us that we're not consciously doing these things. So it should be unconsciously displaying gender equality rather than unconscious biases. Okay, so I think everyone's responded now. Okay, so it's fairly positive. So I would say, so 53% now are saying that they do those things. 35, okay, it's changing, so slightly better. 33% say you don't know, and 11%, at least they're being honest, saying no. Hopefully, the rest of this presentation will inspire those who say they don't know or who said no to take more action. And one of the ways we can do that is, like I mentioned, by sharing stories, by highlighting positive examples and role models. I'm sure you all recognize these people on the screen here, but I want to share a story about them. So obviously that's Tom Hanks and Emma Watson. And I want to share a story which is powerful about male allyship that involves both of these actors. So while Emma Watson is a well-known figure in terms of activism and advocacy for gender equality, it's her partnership with Tom Hanks that showcases the profound impact of male allyship and how he is a role model. In 2014, Emma Watson launched the He for She campaign, a solidarity movement for gender equality at the UN. Her speech was really inspiring, calling on men to join the fight for gender equality. But it wasn't just her words that made waves. It was the response from men around the world, particularly one man who stood out, Tom Hanks. Sorry, that sounded like I was going to introduce Tom Hanks, and here's Tom Hanks, and that would be a really good surprise, wouldn't it? But no, unfortunately, it's still me. So Tom Hanks, a beloved actor and a respected figure took Emma Watson's message to heart. He realized that as a male ally, he had the platform and influence to drive significant change. He didn't just voice his support, he took concrete actions to back it up. And on one notable occasion, at an international film conference in London, Tom Hanks was part of a panel discussing the future of women in film. Unfortunately and ironically, this was a panel made up of men only discussing the future of women. Okay, so Tom Hanks recognized this was a huge mistake. And what did he do? He gave up his place on the panel and he invited Emma Watson to come and replace him. And that was such a powerful gesture, and not just a gesture, but it was sincere action that he took, that shows his support, his allyship, and his advocacy of promoting female-led, activism. So it shows that it requires a lot more than just mere words. They say actions speak louder than words. So let's remember this example and other examples which I will share with you. So it's not just about talking the talk, but walking the talk as well. And each one of us has the power to make a difference, to be the voice that champions equality, and to create a world where everyone's voice is heard and valued. I read a really good book recently called Good Guys. Sorry, I listened to, I should say, if I'm completely honest, on Audible, and I highly recommend it. It's a great listen or read. It's really powerful, and I just wanted to show some of the key tips for male allies that I gained from that book. Number one is listen and learn. Men should actively listen to women's experiences and perspectives without being defensive. This is something we've seen in the poll, and the women on the call mentioned this, some of them. So it's really good to see that that's being supported by this book and the research. So this includes understanding the unique challenges women face in the workplace. Educate yourself. Men should educate themselves on gender issues, biases, and the systemic barriers that women encounter. This can be done through reading, attending workshops and webinars, and engaging in discussions about gender equality. This will in turn help you to increase your GQ. Okay, what is GQ, you may ask? Am I talking about the men's fashion magazine? No, I'm not. So GQ is gender intelligence. So just like you've got EQ, emotional intelligence, IQ, CQ, cultural intelligence, I want you to put this word in your vocabulary, GQ, gender intelligence. Should also speak up. Men should use their voice to advocate for women, challenge sexist behaviors, and call out discriminatory practices, just like, again, we saw in the poll. Because silence, whether it's gender inequality, racial inequality, homophobia, transphobia, and so on, silence can equate to complicity. We must also mentor and sponsor. So men should mentor and sponsor women, providing guidance, opportunities, and visibility. This includes recommending women for high-profile assignments and promotions. We must also promote fairness. So men should work to create an inclusive workplace by ensuring fair hiring practices, promotion practices, and evaluation processes. This involves recognizing and addressing unconscious biases. We must also share the load. Men should support the equitable distribution of work, both in the workplace and at home. So it's no good promoting gender equality in the workplace, but when we come home, if we have a female partner, then all of the childcare or the household responsibilities falls to them. That's being hypocritical. So there must be equality in all aspects of our lives. We must model inclusive behavior, role model when it comes to being respectful, using inclusive language, and creating a culture where all voices are heard and evaluated. We should also build inclusive networks. Men should build and participate in networks that include women and other underrepresented groups, whether this is physical networks or social networks. It applies in both situations. And we should reflect and adjust. So men should continuously reflect on their behavior and seek feedback from women all the time. And this helps identify areas for improvement and adjust actions accordingly. We also have to learn about and avoid microaggressions by any cost. So microaggressions are those comments, behaviors, attitudes that signal, in this case, that women are not welcome, or we're reinforcing particular stereotypes. And we have to always be mindful of such comments and how these impact on women in the workplace and in society. Microaggressions, although they may seem harmless, over time, as they build up, they have an enormous negative impact on the mental health of those receiving those comments. And coming back to the summer of sport, this links in very well with something which happened last week at the Olympics, where despite, well, I say despite, but it's, you know, it's a fact that the Olympics for the first time has achieved gender parity, which means that 50% of participants are male and 50% are female. This is the first time. However, there's still stereotypes being perpetuated, and one of them was by this commentator, Bob Ballard, who's an Australian commentator, and he commented on straight after, so think about the context, straight after the women's, Australian women, after they won the gold medal in the swimming, he said, well, the women just finishing up, you know what women are like, hanging around doing their makeup. As a result of that, he got the sack. And I've been following some of the discussions and debates around this on social media and on the radio, and there's a lot of disagreement. It's a really polarizing situation. So there are some women, especially, and men who say this is absolutely ridiculous. This is woke nonsense gone too far. You know, he just said something harmless. You know, it was addressed. So his female colleague expressed her disgust at the comment straight away. And she said, oh, men do the same. So it should have just been left at that. He shouldn't have been sacked. This was unnecessary. And on the other hand, there are others who say that's absolutely right. And we commend the Australian Olympic Committee for, the broadcaster for sacking him. I personally believe it's not my place to say as a man, but it is what it is. I think, you know, he's been sacked by his company, and you know, I believe if they think that's the right thing to do, then I'm behind them. So I don't know what people think. Can I just see maybe thumbs up, because I can't see everyone, see how many people if you believe that was the right thing to do, to sack him, can I see your thumbs up? Yeah. I don't know if we can see how many that is. How many thumbs up do we have? Can someone
I've had to count very quickly there to catch them all.
Yeah. So it's something that we can debate, but like I said, it's happened. And for me, why was it so negative, and why I agree? Well, it wasn't just said in a private space, it was on, on national, international TV straight after the women that he's talking about won a gold medal. So it's almost like trivializing their achievements straight away. And that is not okay, especially after the challenges and the battles women have faced in sport and wider society. So it's not okay, in my opinion. And then what I want to highlight is, again, sticking with the Olympics, something that often gets overlooked, and that is the experience, so intersectionality, which I'll come to in a minute. But while we've made great strides in the Olympics and in sport, it's not enough when we are not equal to all women. And what do I mean when I say that? I mean about the French Muslim women who wear the headscarf, the hijab. Now, despite the International Olympic Committee being okay, and allowing Muslim athletes to wear a hijab, the French Olympic Committee have decided to ban their own female athletes from wearing the hijab. And there are some really great athletes who will have missed out on the Olympics as a result. And one of them, you can see the sprinter, Sunkamba Silla, who's even banned from the opening ceremony, and Diaba Konate, who is a French basketball player who is currently playing in college basketball in the US and hopes to make it to the WNBA. And she's been banned from being part of the French national basketball team. So why is it that men still can tell women what to wear, whether it's wearing too little or in their eyes too much? So men shouldn't have a say in that. And women should have the right and the freedom to choose what they wear, whether it's little or more. And like I said, this brings us to the topic of intersectionality. Intersectionality is where different social identities intersect, so gender, race, religion, class, and this compounds the discrimination or disadvantage that they face. And understanding intersectionality is crucial for recognizing the diverse experiences of women in the workplace. And related to that is another term which Black women in particular face, and that's misogynoir, which is a term referring to misogyny directed towards Black women, where race and gender both play a role. So, and Diane Abbott is a classic example of this. She's constantly facing racist and misogynistic comments. In terms of role models now, I want to end with on a positive note. So we talked a bit about some of the negative things, that women face, but we need to look up to some role models and see what they're doing, hopefully take inspiration from them. So Sadiq Khan for me is a really good role model when it comes to gender equality. As the Mayor of London, he's launched several initiatives to promote gender equality, including the Behind Every Great City campaign, which celebrates the contributions of women and addresses gender inequality in various sectors, and the hashtag Don't Cross the Line campaign to help prevent misogynistic behaviours on nights out. We know in some boroughs of London it's illegal to catcall, for example. And that's a really great move. Other stars include Daniel Radcliffe and Benedict Cumberbatch, aka Sherlock, and Doctor Strange, and many other characters. Emmanuel Macron, the French Prime Minister, French, thinking of the language, French, the Canadian Prime Minister. So, he's very active in promoting gender equality. So we shouldn't be afraid of the word feminist. Men and women should use it to describe themselves. We have also a quote there from the CEO of Tupperware Brands. And you might think, okay, these are famous men. They have a huge platform by which they can make change and influence change. But what can we do? We can all do something, regardless of our position. We all have some kind of network, some sphere of influence, and we should use any means we have to promote gender equality. And there are some male equality champions there you can see. Break the Ceiling, Touch the Sky. It's an annual list. So you can look on there to see what some of these men are doing and try to bring those practices into your workplace and your teams. And like I said, remember, it all starts at home. So I'm going to end on this slide. And before I hand back to Josie and we take questions, I just want to invite the men on this call again to take part in another quick poll while I hand back to Josie. And that is this question here. What will you do as a male ally more of as a result of this webinar? What will you commit to doing more of? So please fill that in and I'll hand back to Josie. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, Wally. That was really interesting. So many interesting facts in there, and a couple of things have really struck up a conversation, particularly the bit about the guy from the Olympics getting fired. There was one question further up that Paul Twining had already asked, which was, is there a danger that men who haven't got it could start acting as white knights? So I don't know if you want to address that one first and see if any others come in.
Yeah, I assume by that what is meant is, playing the savior role. So yeah, I mentioned this already. I think it's very dangerous for us to go in there sort of, thinking, even like I said, even claiming that we are allies, that's really dangerous. So let us do the work and let women decide whether we are allies or not, and not be worried about that. So always do the right thing, no matter who's paying attention or not. And that's how we can be consistent and not hypocrites, if that makes sense.
Thanks. Are there any other questions in the chat whilst people are still responding? Or raise your hand and ask if you want to. Yeah, Manuel?
Hi. Hi, yeah, it's fine. It's actually Manuel, so that's okay. Hi, Wally, and thank you very much for this great session. So what I was going to say is that I think education plays a very big part in this, and we need to start from the first go in terms of giving equal opportunities to males and females, and particularly girls, and from a cultural perspective, allowing girls to flourish in terms of through education and other means as well. And I think that's one of the things, and that's going to change mindset. And the reason I say that is if that mindset then comes into the workplace, then you can only have true equality. And there's a point there about representation matters. So when you spoke through the stats of female colleagues being in the higher jobs, in the higher vocations and things like that, still lots of work to do, and the gender pay gap as well. But I guess when we change that mindset within the civil service to say equality and give, female colleagues the equity as well to be able to have the same experiences as the male colleagues, and only then are we going to see a change. So there has to be a change in mindset. Otherwise, this time next year, we're still going to be talking about the same themes.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I couldn't agree with you more. And I think there's a lot of work to do. And we are up against the counter narrative as well. As you saw there, some of the current attitudes, especially among Gen Z and millennials. And part of that blame goes to people like Andrew Tate. And those are the people we're up against. So, men have a role to challenge that. And whether that's in education, in the home as well, especially, keeping an eye on our teenage boys and checking their attitudes. But yeah, in the workplace, definitely, we need to, like a lot of those suggestions made, we need to give women more opportunities to flourish. And yeah, I think, otherwise we'll be in the same position next year, like you say. But was there anything specifically around any of that you wanted to address, or just a general sort of observation?
I didn't know what to expect coming into this call, and I thought it was going to go down a different direction. But it was good how you sort of like went through the chain of events to like your educational journey. It's given me food for thought. So I think it's going to be good when we get hold of this recording to share it wide. And the reason I say that is it might help other male colleagues change their mindset and ask questions and educate themselves. I mean, look, there's 55 colleagues on here. It's a shame that we haven't got many more. If we did, then we'd be in a better position. But I think the key takeaway for me is I'll be sharing this recording in the Financial Conduct Authority, and I'd encourage others to do the same as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Marwa.
Thank you.
Thanks. So Jenny's got a question as well.
Hi, Wally. Brilliant presentation. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jenny.
You mentioned briefly at the beginning the growth mindset and that we're not always going to get stuff right all the time. I guess I don't want to speak for all men here, just like I don't want to speak for all women, but something I've had reflected to me from within my team is that people have got a fear of saying the wrong thing. So I think that stops people saying something to call out maybe behavior that's inappropriate of greater or lesser degrees. And so I wondered, would you be able, does anyone on the call, or do you have a particular phrase that you feel you could share with people to help gently call out some of that stuff? And do you have any reflections on that kind of fear of getting it wrong, stopping people from doing something? And I think that's maybe a theme I've picked up on.
Yeah, I think that's a genuine concern, and I definitely agree with you. So unfortunately, we get it a lot, not just for gender equality, but all aspects of diversity and inclusion. People are afraid to say something for fear of getting it wrong. And I think it goes both ways. So yes, we should be encouraging people to speak up and create those safe spaces so they can say something. And if they make a mistake, then we shouldn't be too harsh on them. We should correct them gently, educate them, and let them correct their ways. Of course, that depends on the severity of their comments or their actions, and whether they're willing to change. So that's the key, and their intention. So sometimes someone might say something, really inadvertently, accidentally, and off the cuff, but they'll recognize it straight away, and they'll seek forgiveness. But other times they genuinely can't see what they said wrong, and I think that's where the problem lies. And other times they just do, it's just a bit of banter, or grow up, it's just a bit of banter, don't take everything to heart. That's where the problem lies, and those are the behaviors we need to challenge and let people know that's not acceptable. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it goes both ways. So on the receiving end, we should also be more patient with certain people if they make a mistake. So not jump on them straight away, but it would depend on the severity of what they've done or said. And like I said, with that Australian commentator, for me, it was the timing. It couldn't come at a worse time.
Thanks, Wally. I better draw us to a close because
Yeah.
it's bang on 3 o'clock now. We've got a couple more questions in the chat, and I can see someone else has their hands up. But maybe if you pop your question in the chat, Wally, I don't know if you're okay to kind of have a look back and address anything that's not been answered. Because
Can we just quickly take that question? I can't see who it is.
It's gone now.
Camlet, can we just quickly take...
but I'm aware people might want to drop off. So if you need to go, thank you very much, and do feel free to drop off. Otherwise, we'll stay on for a couple more minutes. Hamlet, do you want to say a question?
Yes. Thanks for taking my question. I agree with the previous person. Forgive me, I forgot his name, but he did mention that education is the key in regards to teaching people as a whole, basically, in regards to how to about gender equality. I would like to know from yourself, how far do you think we should go with that? Because some people will say, well, you might start teaching children at the age of, I don't know, 15. Some might say, well, let's go even younger. Let's go at primary school age, at around the age of 9 or 10. How far do you think we should go with that, do you think?
I think it starts right from birth. I think, and like I said, it starts at home. If we're displaying those behaviors in the home, then it's not something which is forced, it's natural. So as men, sharing those responsibilities in the home, showing gender equality to our children right from the start. So I think right from the start. And in the books they read and the things that they watch, making sure that's all representative and showing those same values. So thank you for the question. I know we've gone well over. So
yes, exactly. A great session, by the way. I've got to admit.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone that's hung on for the extra few minutes. Thanks again, Wally, so much for doing this on behalf of the Women's Staff Network. It's been a really good session. If you're interested in joining the network at all, you can drop me an email. We'll get you on the Teams channel. We put on sessions every month. And I will now try my best to see if I can get Tom Hanks for a future session, because I think that would be quite good. But thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Really appreciate it. And thank you again, Wally.
Thanks, Josie. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.